Check, check, mic check. Check, 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 check. Check, check. Check, check. Chapter 7. Truth. I need my reading light. there. Oh yeah, I need my fan. Oh. Okay. I'm good to go. All right. Chapter 7. Truth. The Teutonic tribes have a national singleness of heart, which contrasts with the Latin races. The German name has a proverbial significance of sincerity and honest meaning. The arts bear testimony to it. The faces of clergy and laity in old sculptures, and illuminated missals are charged with earnest belief. Add to this hereditary rectitude the punctuality and precise dealing which commerce creates, and you have the English truth and credit. The government strictly performs its engagements. The subjects do not understand trifling on its part. When any breach of promise occurred in the old days of prerogative, it was resented by the people as an intolerable grievance. And in modern times, any slipperiness in the government of political faith or any repudiation of crookedness in matters of finance would bring the whole nation to a committee of inquiry and reform. Private men keep their promises, never so trivial. Down goes the flying word on the tablets and is indelible as Domesday Book. Their practical power rests on their national sincerity. Veracity derives from instinct and marks superiority in organization. Nature has endowed some animals with cunning as a compensation for strength withheld, but it has provoked the malice of all others as if avengers of public wrong. In the nobler kinds where strength could be afforded, her races are loyal to truth, as truth is the foundation of the social state. Beasts that make no truce with man do not break faith with each other. It is said that the wolf who makes a cache of his prey and brings his fellows with him to the spot, if on digging it is not found, is instantly and unresistingly torn in pieces. English veracity seems to result on a sounder animal structure, as if they could afford it. They are blunt in saying what they think, sparing of promises, and they require plain dealing of others. We will not have to do with a man in a mask. Let us know the truth. Draw a straight line. Hit whom and where it will. Alfred, whom the affection of the nation makes the type of their race, is called by a writer at the Norman Conquest the truth speaker. Aluretus Veridicus. Geoffrey of Monmouth says of King Aurelius, uncle of Arthur, that above all things he hated a lie. The Northman Guttorm said to King Olaf, "It is royal work to fulfill royal words." The mottos of their families are monetary proverbs, as fair fac say do of the Fairfaxes, say and seal of the house of Fiennes, vero nil varius of the De Veres. To be king of their word is their pride. When they unmask Kant, they say, the English of this is, etc. And to give the lie is the extreme insult. The phrase of the lowest of the people is honor bright, and their vulgar praise, his word is as good as his bond. They hate shuffling and equivocation, and the cause is damaged in the public opinion, on which any paltering can be fixed. Even Lord Chesterfield, with his French breeding, when he came to define a gentleman, declared that truth made his distinction, and nothing ever spoken by him would find so hearty a suffrage from his nation. The Duke of Wellington, who had the best right to say so, advises the French General Kellerman that he may rely on the parole of an English officer. The English of all classes value themselves on this trait, as distinguishing them from the French, who, in the popular belief, are more polite than true. An Englishman understates, avoids the superlative, checks himself in compliments, alleging that in the French language one cannot speak without lying. They love reality in wealth, power, hospitality, and do not easily learn to make a show and take the world as it goes. They are not fond of ornaments, and if they wear them, they must be gems. They read gladly in old Fuller that a lady in the reign of Elizabeth would have as patiently digested a lie as the wearing of false stones or pendants of counterfeit pearl. They have the earth hunger, or preference for property in the land, which is said to mark the Teutonic nations. They build of stone. Public and private buildings are massive and durable. In comparing their ships, houses, and public offices with the American, it is commonly said that they spend a pound where we spend $1. Plain, rich clothes, plain, rich equipage, plain, rich finish throughout their house and belongings mark the English truth. They confide in each other. English believes in English. The French feel the superiority of this probity. The Englishman is not springing a trap for his admiration, but is honestly minding his business. The Frenchman is vain. Madame de Staël says that the English irritated Napoleon, mainly because they have found out how to unite success with honesty. She was not aware how wide an application her foreign readers would give to the remark. To the remark. Wellington discovered the ruin of Bonaparte's affairs by his own probity. He augured ill of the empire as soon as he saw that it was mendacious and lived by war. If war do not bring in its sequel new trade, better agriculture, and manufactures, but only games, fireworks, and spectacles, no prosperity could support it, much less a nation decimated for conscripts and out of pocket like France. So he drudged for years on his military works at Lisbon, and from this base at last extended his gigantic lines to Waterloo, believing in his countrymen and their syllogism, above all, the rhodomontade of Europe. At a St. George's festival in Montreal, where I happened to be a guest since my return home, I observed that the chairman complimented his compatriots by saying they confided that wherever they met an Englishman, they found a man who would speak the truth. And one cannot think this festival fruitless if all over the world, on the 23rd of April, wherever 2 or 3 English are found, they meet to encourage each other in the nationality of veracity. In the power of saying rude truth, sometimes in the lion's mouth, no men surpass them. On the king's birthday, when each bishop was expected to offer the king a purse of gold, Latimer gave Henry VIII a copy of Vulgate, with a mark at the passage, "Whoremongers and adulterers God will judge." And they so honor stoutness in each other that the king passed it over. They are tenacious of their belief and can not easily change their opinions to suit the hour. They are like ships with too much head on to come quickly about, nor will prosperity or even adversity be allowed to shake their habitual view of conduct. Whilst I was in London, M. Guizot arrived there on his escape from Paris in February 1848. Many private friends called on him. His name was immediately proposed as an honorary member of the Athenaeum. Guizot was blackballed. Certainly they knew the distinction of his name. But the Englishman is not fickle. He had really made up his mind now for years, as he read his newspaper, to hate and despise Guizot. And the altered position of the man as an illustrious exile and a guest in the country makes no difference to him, as it would instantly to an American. They require the same adherence, thorough conviction, and reality in public men. It is the want of character which makes the low reputation of the Irish members. See them, they said, 127, all voting like sheep, never proposing anything, and all but for voting the income tax, which was an ill-judged concession of the government, relieving Irish property from the burdens charged on English. They have a horror of adventurers in or out of Parliament. The ruling passion of Englishmen in these days is a terror of humbug. In the same proportion, they value honesty, stoutness, and adherence to your own. They like a man committed to his objects. They hate the French as frivolous. They hate the Irish as aimless. They hate the Germans as professors. In February 1848, they said, "Look, the French king and his party fell for want of a shot. They had not conscience to shoot." So entirely was the pith and heart of monarchy eaten out. They attack their own politicians every day on the same grounds as adventurers. They love stoutness and standing for your right, and declining money or promotion that costs any concession. The barrister refuses the silk gown of Queen's Counsel if his junior have it one day earlier. Lord Collingwood would not accept his medal for victory on 14 February 1797 if he did not receive one for victory on 1st June 1794, and the long withholden medal was accorded. When Castlereagh dissuaded Lord Wellington from going to the King's levee until the unpopular Sintra business had been explained, he replied, "You furnish me a reason for going. I will go to this, or I will never go to a King's levee." The radical mob at Oxford cried after the Tory Lord Eldon, "There's old Eldon. Cheer him. He never ratted." They have given the parliamentary nickname of trimmers to the time servers, whom English character does not love. They are very liable in their politics to extraordinary delusions, thus to believe what stands recorded in the gravest books. That movement of 10 April 1848 was urged or assisted by foreigners, which, to be sure, is paralleled by the democratic whimsy in this country, which I have noticed to be shared by men sane on other points, that the English are at the bottom of the agitation of slavery in American politics, and then again by the French popular legends on the subject of perfidious Albion. But suspicion will make fools of nations as of citizens. A slow temperament makes them less rapid and ready than other countrymen, and has given occasion to the observation that English wit comes afterwards, which the French denote as esprit d'escalier. This dullness makes their attachment to home and their adherence in all foreign countries to home habits. The Englishman who visits Mount Etna will carry his tea kettle to the top. The old Italian author of the Relation of England in 1500 says, "I have it on the best information that when the war is actually raging most furiously, they will seek for good eating and all their other comforts, without thinking what harm might befall them. Then their eyes seem to be set at the bottom of a tunnel, and they affirm the one small fact they know, with the best faith in the world, that nothing else exists. And as their own belief in genius is perfect, they readily, on all occasions, apply the pecuniary argument as final. Thus, when the Rochester rappings began to be heard of in England, a man deposited £100 in a sealed box in the Dublin Bank, and then advertised in the newspapers to all somnambulists, mesmerizers, and others, that whoever could tell him the number of his note would have the money. He let it lie there 6 months, the newspapers now and then, at his instance, stimulating the attention of the adepts. But none could ever tell him, and he said, "Now let me never be bothered more with this proven lie." It is told of good Sir John that he heard a case stated by counsel, and made up his mind. Then the counsel for the other side, taking their turn to speak, he found himself so unsettled and perplexed that he exclaimed, "So help me God, I will never listen to evidence again." Any number of delightful examples of this English stolidity are the anecdotes of Europe. I knew a very worthy man, a magistrate, I believe he was, in the town of Derby, who went to the opera to see Malibran. In one scene, the heroine was to rush across a ruined bridge. Mr. B arose and mildly, yet firmly, called the attention of the audience and the performers to the fact that, in his judgment, the bridge was unsafe. The English stolidity contrasts with French wit and tact. The French, it is commonly said, have greatly more influence in Europe than the English. What influence the English have is by brute force of wealth and power. That of the French by affinity and talent. The Italian is subtle, the Spaniard treacherous. Tortures, it is said, could never wrest from an Egyptian the confession of a secret. None of these traits belong to the Englishman. His choler and conceit force everything out. Defoe, who knew his countrymen well, says of them, "In close intrigue their faculty is but weak, for generally whatever they know they speak, and often their own counsels undermine by mere infirmity without design. From whence the learned say it doth proceed, that English treasons never can succeed, for they are so open-hearted, you may know their own most secret thoughts, and others too. Jeez, this just keeps going. Cockayne. Cockayne? Is that how you spell it? Chapter 8. Character. The English race are reputed morose. I do not know that they have sadder brows than their neighbors of northern climates. They are sad by comparison with the singing and dancing nations. Not sadder, but slow and staid as finding their joys at home. They too believe that where there is no enjoyment of life, there can be no vigor and art in speech or thought. That your merry heart goes all the way, your sad one tires in a mile. This trait of gloom has been fixed on them by French travelers who, from Froissart, Voltaire, Lesage, Mirabeau, down to the lively journalists of the feuilletons, have spent their wit on the solemnity of their neighbors. The French say gay conversation is unknown in their island. The Englishman finds no relief from reflection except in reflection. When he wishes for amusement, he goes to work. His hilarity is like an attack of fever. Religion, the theater, and the reading the books of his country all feed and increase his natural melancholy. The police does not interfere with public diversions. It thinks itself bound in duty to respect the pleasures and rare gaiety of this inconsolable nation, and their well-known courage is entirely attributed to their disgust of life. I suppose their gravity of demeanor and their few words have obtained this reputation. As compared with the Americans, I think them cheerful and contented. Young people in this country are much more prone to melancholy. The English have a mild aspect and a ringing, cheerful voice. They are large-natured and not so easily amused as the Southerners, and are among them as grown people among children, requiring war or trade or engineering or science instead of frivolous games. They are proud and private, and even if disposed to recreation, will avoid an open garden. They sported sadly. A bunch of French said Froissart, and I suppose never nation built their party walls so thick, or their garden fences so high. Meat and wine produce no effect on them. They are just as cold, quiet, and composed at the end as at the beginning of dinner. The reputation of taciturnity they have enjoyed for 600 or 700 years, a kind of pride in bad public speaking, is noted in the House of Commons, as if they were willing to show that they did not live by their tongues, or thought they spoke well enough if they had the tone of gentlemen. In mixed company they shut their mouths. A Yorkshire mill owner told me he had ridden more than once all the way from London to Leeds in the first-class carriage with the same persons and no word exchanged. The clubhouses were established to cultivate social habits, and it is rare that more than two eat together, and oftenest one eats alone. Was it then a stroke of humor in the serious Swedenborg, or was it only his pitiless logic that made him shut up the English souls in a heaven by themselves? They are contradictorily described as sour, splenetic, and stubborn, and as mild, sweet, and sensible. The truth is, they have great range and variety of character. Commerce sends abroad. Commerce sends abroad multitudes of different classes. The choleric Welshman, the fervid Scot, the bilious resident in the East or West Indies, are wide of the perfect behavior of the educated and dignified man of family. So is the burly farmer, so is the country squire, with his narrow and violent life. In every inn is the commercial room in which travelers or bagmen who carry patterns and solicit orders for the manufacturers are wont to be entertained. It easily happens that this class should characterize England to the foreigner who meets them on the road and at every public house, whilst the gentry avoid the taverns or seclude themselves whilst in them. But these classes are the right English stock, and it may fairly show the national qualities, before yet art and education have dealt with them. They are good lovers, good haters, slow but obstinate admirers, and in all things very much steeped in their temperament, like man hardly awaked from deep sleep, which they enjoy. Their habits and instincts cleave to nature. They are of the earth, earthy, and of the sea kinds, attached to it for what it yields to them, and not from any sentiment. They are full of coarse strength, rude exercise, butcher's meat, and sound sleep, and suspect any poetic insinuation or any hint for the conduct of life which reflects on this animal existence, as if somebody were fumbling at the umbilical cord and might stop their supplies. They doubt a man's sound judgment if he does not eat with appetite, and shake their heads if he is particularly chaste. Take them as they come. You shall find in the common people a surly indifference, sometimes gruffness and ill temper, and in minds of more power, magazines of inexhaustible war challenging. The ruggedest hour that time and spite dare bring to frown upon the enraged Northumberland. They are headstrong believers and defenders of their opinion, and not less resolute in maintaining their whim and perversity. Hezekiah Woodward wrote a book against the Lord's Prayer. And one can believe that Burton, the anatomist of melancholy, having predicted from the stars the hour of his death, slipped the knot himself round his own neck, not to falsify his horoscope. Their looks bespeak an invincible stoutness. They have extreme difficulty to run away and will die game. Wellington said of the young coxcombs of the Life Guards, delicately brought up, but the puppies fight well. And Nelson said of his sailors, they really mind shot no more than peas. Of absolute stoutness, no nation has more or better examples. They are good at storming redoubts, at boarding frigates, at dying in the last ditch, or any desperate service which has daylight and honor in it. But not, I think, at enduring the rack or any passive obedience, like jumping off a castle roof at the word of a czar. Being both vascular and highly organized, so as to be very sensible of pain, and intellectual.
Hello, sorry for bothering you. I want to offer promotion of your channel, viewers, followers, views, chatbot.
Turn that TTS off. So as to be very sensible of pain and intellectual, so as to see reason and glory in a matter. Of that constitutional force which yields the supplies of the day, they have the more than enough. The excess, which creates courage on fortitude, genius in poetry, invention in mechanics, enterprise in trade, magnificence in wealth, splendor in ceremonies, petulance and projects in youth. The young men have a rude health, which runs into peccant humors. They drink brandy like water, cannot expand their quantities of waste strength on riding, hunting, swimming, and fencing, and run into absurd frolics with the gravity of the Eumenides. They stoutly carry into every nook and corner of the earth their turbulent sense, leaving no lie uncontradicted, no pretension unexamined. They chew hashish, cut themselves with poisoned creases, swing their hammock in the boughs of the Bohan Upas, taste every poison, buy every secret. At Naples they put Saint January's blood in an alembic. They saw a hole into the head of the winking virgin to know why she winks. Measure with an English foot rule every cell of the Inquisition, every Turkish Kaaba, every Holy of Holies. Translate and send to Bentley the Arcanum, bribed and bullied away from shuddering Brahmins, and measure their own strength by the terror they cause. These travelers are of every class, the best and the worst, and it may easily happen that those of rudest behavior are taken notice of and remembered. The Saxon melancholy in the vulgar rich and poor appears as gushes of ill humor, which every check exasperates into sarcasm and vituperation. These are the multitudes of rude young English who have the self-sufficiency and bluntness of their nation, and who, with their disdain of the rest of mankind, and with this indigestion and choler, have made the English traveler a proverb for uncomfortable and offensive manners. There was no bad description of the Briton generically. What was said 200 years ago of one particular Oxford scholar. He was a very bold man, uttered anything that came into his mind, not only among his companions, but in public coffee houses, and would often speak his mind of particular persons, then accidentally present without examining the company he was in, for which he was often reprimanded and several times threatened to be kicked and beaten. The common Englishman is prone to forget a cardinal article in the Bill of Social Rights, that every man has a right to his own ears. No man can claim to usurp more than a few cubic feet of the audibilities of a public room, or to put upon the company with the loud statement of his crotchets or personalities. Crochets. But it is in the deep traits of race that the fortunes of nations are written, and however derived, whether a happier tribe or mixture of tribes, the air, or what circumstance that mixed for them the golden mean of temperament, here exists the best stock in the world, broad-fronted, broad-bottomed, best for depth, range, and equability, men of aplomb and reserves, great range and many moods, strong instincts, yet apt for culture, war class as well as clerks, earls and tradesmen, wise minority, as well as foolish majority, abysmal temperament, hiding wells of wrath, and glooms on which no sunshine settles, alternated with a common sense of humanity which hold them fast to every piece of cheerful duty, making this temperament a sea to which all storms are superficial, a race to which their fortunes flow as if they alone had the elastic organization at once fine and robust enough for dominion, as if the burly, inexpressive, now mute and contumacious, now fierce and sharp-tongued dragon, which once made the island light with his fiery breath, had bequeathed his ferocity to his conqueror. They hide virtues under vices, or the semblance of them. It is the misshapen, hairy Scandinavian troll, again, who lifts the cart out of the mire, or threshes. The corn that 10 day laborers could not end. But it is done in the dark and with muttered maledictions. He is a churl with a soft place in his heart, whose speech is as brash of bitter waters, but who loves to help you at a pinch. He says no and serves you, and your thanks disgust him. Here was lately a cross-grained miser, odd and ugly, resembling in countenance the portrait of Punch, with the laugh left out, rich by his own industry, sulking in a lonely house, who never gave a dinner to any man, and disdained all courtesies, yet as true a worshipper of beauty in form and color as ever existed, and profusely pouring over the cold mind of his countrymen creations of grace and truth, removing the reproach of sterility from English art, catching from their savage climate every fine hint, and importing into their galleries every tint and trait of sunnier cities and skies. Making an era in painting, and when he saw that the splendor of one of his pictures in the exhibition dimmed his rivals that hung next to it, secretly took a brush and blackened his own. They do not wear their heart in their sleeve for daws to peck at. They have the phlegm or staidness, which it is compliment to disturb. Great men, said Aristotle, are always of a nature originally melancholy. It is the habit of a mind which attaches to abstractions, with a passion which gives vast results. They dare to displease. They do not speak to expectation. They like the sayers of no better than the sayers of yes. Each of them has an opinion which he feels it becomes him to express, all the more that it differs from yours. They are meditating opposition. This gravity is inseparable from minds of great resource. There is an English hero superior to the French, the German, the Italian, or the Greek. When he is brought to the strife with fate, he sacrifices a richer material possession, and on more purely metaphysical grounds. He is there with his own consent, face to face with fortune, which he defies. On deliberate choice and from grounds of character, he has elected his part to live and die for, and dies with grandeur. This race has added new elements to humanity and has a deeper root in the world. They have a great range of scale, from veracity to exquisite refinement. With larger scale, they have great retrieving power. After running each tendency to an extreme, they try another attack with equal heat. More intellectual than other races, when they live with other races, they do not take their language, but bestow their own. They subsidize other nations, and are not subsidized. They proselyte, and are not proselyted. They assimilate other races to themselves, and are not assimilated. The English do not calculate the conquest of the Indies. It fell to their character. So they administer, in different parts of the world, the codes of every empire and race. In Canada, Old French law. In the Mauritius, the code of Napoleon. In the West Indies, the edicts of the Spanish Cortes. In the East Indies, the laws of Menu. In the Isle of Man, of the Scandinavian thing. At the Cape of Good Hope, of the Old Netherlands. And in the Ionian Islands, the Pandects of Justinian. They are very conscious of their advantageous position in history. England is the lawgiver, the patron, the instructor, the ally. Compare the tone of the French and of the English press. The first, querulous, captious, sensitive about English opinion. The English press, never timorous about French opinion, but arrogant and contemptuous. They are testy and headstrong through an excess of will and bias, churlish as men sometimes please to be who do not forget a debt, who ask no favors, and who will do what they like with their own. With education and intercourse, these asperities wear off and leave the goodwill pure. If anatomy is reformed according to national tendencies, I suppose the spleen will hereafter be found in the Englishman, not found in the American, and differencing the one from the other. I anticipate another anatomical discovery that this organ will be found to be cortical and caducous, that they are superficially morose, but at last tender-hearted, herein differing from Rome and the Latin nations. Nothing savage, nothing mean resides in the English heart. They are subject to panics of credulity and of rage, but the temper of the nation, however disturbed, settles itself soon and easily, as in the temperate zone, the sky, after whatever storms, clears again. Whatever storm clears again. And serenity is its normal condition. A saving stupidity masks and protects their perception as the curtain of the eagle's eye. Our swifter Americans, when they first deal with English, pronounce them stupid, but later do them justice as people who wear well or hide their strength. To understand the power of performance that is in their finest wits, in the patient Newton, or in the versatile, transcendent poets, or in the Dugdales, Gibbons, Allens, Eldons, and Peels, one should see how English day laborers hold out. High and low, they are of an unctuous texture. There is an adipocere in their constitution, as if they had oil also for their mental wheels and could perform vast amounts of work without damaging themselves. Even the scale of expense on which people live, and to which scholars and professional men conform, proves the tension of their muscle, when vast numbers are found who can each lift this enormous load. I might even add, their daily feasts argue a savage vigor of body. No nation was ever so rich in able men, gentlemen, as Charles I said of Strafford, whose abilities might make a prince rather afraid than ashamed in the greatest affairs of state. Men of such temper that, like Baron Vere, had one seen him returning from a victory, he would by his silence have suspected that he had lost the day. And had he beheld him in a retreat, he would have collected him a conqueror by the cheerfulness of his spirit. The following passage from the Heimskringla might almost stand as a portrait of the modern Englishman. Haldor was very stout, and strong and remarkably handsome in appearances. King Harold gave him this testimony, that he, among all his men, cared least about doubtful circumstances, whether they betokened danger or pleasure, for whatever turned up. He was never in higher nor in lower spirits, never slept less nor more on account of them, nor ate nor drank, but according to his custom. Haldor was not a man of many words, but short in conversation, told his opinion bluntly, and was obstinate and hard, and this could not please the king, who had many clever people about him, zealous in his service. Haldor remained a short time with the king, then came to Iceland, where he took up his abode in Hjardarholt, and dwelt in that farm to a very advanced age. The national temper in the civil history is not flashy or whiffling. The slow, deep English mass smolders with fire, which at last sets all its borders in flame. The wrath of London is not French wrath, but has a long memory, and in its hottest heat, a register and rule. Half their strength they put not forth. They are capable of sublime resolution, and if hereafter the war of races, often predicted and making itself a war of opinions also, question of despotism and liberty coming from Eastern Europe, should menace the English civilization, these sea kings may take once again to their floating castles and find a new home and a second millennium of power in their colonies. The stability of England is the security of the modern world. If the English race were as mutable as the French, what reliance? But the English stand for liberty. The conservative, money-loving, lord-loving English are yet liberty-loving, and so freedom is safe, for they have more personal force than any other people. The nation always resists the immoral action of their government. They think humanely on the affairs of France, of Turkey, of Poland, of Hungary, of Schleswig, Holstein, though overborne by the statecraft of the rulers at last. Does the early history of each tribe show the permanent bias which, though not less potent, is masked as the tribes spread its activity into colonies, commerce, codes, arts, letters? The early history shows it as the musician plays the air which he proceeds to conceal in a tempest of variations. In Alfred, in The Northman, one may read the genius of the English society, namely that private life is the place of honor. Glory, a career, and ambition, words familiar to the longitude of Paris, are seldom heard in English speech. Nelson wrote from their hearts his homely telegraph. England expects every man to do his duty. For actual service, for the dignity of a profession, or to appease diseased or inflamed talent, the Army and Navy may be entered, the worst boys doing well in the Navy, and the civil service in departments where serious official work is done, and they hold in esteem the barrister engaged in the severer studies of the law. But the calm, sound, and most British Briton shrinks from public life as charlatanism, and respects an economy founded on agriculture, coal mines, manufactures, or trade, which secures an independence through the creation of real values. They wish neither to command nor obey, but to be kings in their own houses. They are intellectual and deeply enjoy literature, They like well to have the world served up to them in books, maps, models, and every mode of exact information. And though not creators in art, they value its refinement. They are ready for leisure, can direct and fill their own day, nor need so much as others the constraint of a necessity. But the history of the nation discloses at every turn this original predilection for private independence, and however this inclination may have been disturbed by the bribes with which their vast colonial power has warped men out of orbit, the inclination endures, informs and reforms the laws, letters, manners, and occupations. They choose that welfare which is compatible with the commonwealth, knowing that such alone is stable. As wise merchants prefer investments in the 3%. Chapter 9. Cockayne. Spelled Cockayne. The English are a nation of humorists. Individual right is pushed to the uttermost bound, compatible with public order. Property is so perfect that it seems the craft of that race, and not to exist elsewhere. The king cannot step on an acre which the peasant refuses to sell. A testator endows a dog or a rookery, and Europe cannot interfere with his absurdity. Every individual has his particular way of living, which he pushes to folly, and the decided sympathy of his compatriots is engaged to back up Mr. Crump's whim by statutes and chancellors and horse guards. There is no freak so ridiculous, but some Englishman has attempted to immortalize by money and law. British citizenship is as omnipotent as Roman was. Mr. Cockayne, is that how you say that? Cockayne. Mr. Cockayne is very sensible of this. The pursy man means by freedom the right to do as he pleases, and does wrong in order to feel his freedom, and makes a conscience of persisting in it. He is intensely patriotic, for his country is so small. His confidence in the power and performance of his nation makes him provokingly incurious about other nations. He dislikes foreigners. Swedenborg, who lived much in England, notes the similitude of minds among the English is consequence of which they contract familiarity with friends or of that nation, and seldom with others, and they regard foreigners as one looking through a telescope from the top of a palace regards those who dwell or wander about out of the city. A much older traveler, the Venetian, who wrote The Relation of England in 1500, says, "The English are great lovers of themselves and of everything belonging to them. They think that there are no other men than themselves, and no other world but England. And whenever they see a handsome foreigner, they say he looks like an Englishman, and it is a great pity he should not be an Englishman. And whenever they partake of any delicacy with a foreigner, they ask him whether such a thing is made in his country. When he adds epithets of praise, his climax is so English. And when he wishes to pay you the highest compliment, he says, I should not know you from an Englishman." France is, by its natural contrast, a kind of blackboard on which English character draws its own traits in chalk. This arrogance habitually exhibits itself in allusions to the French. I suppose that all men of English blood in America, Europe, or Asia have a secret feeling of joy that they are not French natives. Mr. Coleridge is said to have given public thanks to God at the close of a lecture that he had defended him from being able to utter a single sentence in the French language. I have found that Englishmen have such a good opinion of England that the ordinary phrases in all good society of postponing or disparaging one's own things in talking with a stranger are seriously mistaken by them for an insuppressible homage to the merits of their nation. And the New Yorker or Pennsylvanian, who modestly laments the disadvantage of a new country, log huts, and savages, is surprised by the instant and unfeigned commiseration of the whole company, who plainly account all the world out of England a heap of rubbish. The same insular limitation pinches his foreign politics. He sticks to his traditions and usages, and so help him God, he will force his island bylaws down the throat of great countries like India, China, Canada, Australia, and not only so, but impose whapping on the Congress of Vienna and trample down all nationalities with his taxed boots. Lord Chatham goes for liberty and no taxation without representation, for that is British law. But not a hobnail shall they dare make in America, but buy their nails in England, for that also is British law. And the fact that British commerce was to be recreated by the independence of America took them all by surprise. In short, I'm afraid that English nature is so rank and aggressive as to be a little incompatible with every other. The world is not wide enough for two. But beyond this nationality, it must be admitted, the island offers a daily worship to the Old Norse god Brage, celebrated among our Scandinavian forefathers for his eloquence and a majestic air. The English have a steady courage that fits them for great attempts and endurance. They have also a petty courage, through which every man delights in showing himself for what he is and in doing what he can, so that in all companies each of them has too good an opinion of himself to imitate anybody. He hides no defect of his form, features, dress, connection, or birthplace, for he thinks every circumstance belonging to him comes recommended to you. If one of them have a bald or a red or a green head, or bow legs, or a scar, or mark, or a paunch, or a squeaking or a raven voice, he has persuaded himself that there is something modish and becoming in it, and that it sits well on him. But nature makes nothing in vain, and this little superfluity of self-regard in the English brain is one of the secrets of their power and history. It sets every man on being and doing what he really is and can. It takes away a dodging, skulking, secondary air and encourages a frank and manly bearing, so that each man makes the most of himself and loses no opportunity for want of pushing. A man's personal defects will commonly have, with the rest of the world, precisely that importance which they have to himself. If he makes light of them, so will other men. We all find in these a convenient meter of character, since a little man would be ruined by the vexation. I remember a shrewd politician in one of our western cities told me that he had known several successful statesmen by their foible. And another, an ex-governor of Illinois, said to me, if the man knew anything, he would sit in a corner and be modest, but he is such an ignorant peacock that he goes bustling up and down and hits on extraordinary discoveries. There is also the benefit in brag, that the speaker is unconsciously expressing his own ideal. Humor him by all means, draw it all out, and hold him to it. Their culture generally enables the traveled English to avoid any ridiculous extremes of this self-pleasing and to give it an agreeable air. Then the natural disposition is fostered by the respect which they find entertained in the world for English ability. It was said of Louis XIV that his gait and air were becoming enough in so great a monarch, yet would have been ridiculous in another man. So the prestige of the English name warrants a certain confident bearing which a Frenchman or Belgian could not carry. At all events, they feel themselves at liberty to assume the most extraordinary tone on the subject of English merits. An English lady on the Rhine, hearing a German speaking of her party as foreigners, exclaimed, "No, we are not foreigners. We are English. It is you that are foreigners." They tell you daily in London the story of the Frenchman and Englishman who quarreled. Both were unwilling to fight, but their companions put them up to it. At last it was agreed that they should fight alone, in the dark, and with pistols. The candles were put out, and the Englishman, to make sure not to hit anybody, fired up the chimney and brought down the Frenchman. They have no curiosity about foreigners, and answer any information you may volunteer with oh, until the informant makes up his mind that they shall die in their ignorance for any help he will offer. There are really no limits to this conceit, though brighter men among them make painful efforts to be candid. The habit of brag runs through all classes, from the Times newspaper, through politicians and poets, through Wordsworth, Carlyle, Mill, and Sidney Smith, down to the boys of Eton, in the gravest treatise on political economy, in a philosophical essay, in books of science. One is surprised by the most innocent exhibition of unflinching nationality. In a tract on corn, a most amiable and accomplished gentleman writes thus: though Britain, according to Bishop Berkeley's idea, were surrounded by a wall of brass 10,000 cubits in height, still she would as far excel the rest of the globe in riches as she now does, both in this secondary quality and in the more important ones of freedom, virtue, and science. The English dislike the American structure of society, whilst yet trade, mills, public education, and Chartism are doing what they can to create in England the same social condition. America is the paradise of the economists, is the favorable exception invariably quoted to the rules of ruin. But when he speaks directly of the Americans, the islander forgets his philosophy and remembers his disparaging anecdotes. But this childish patriotism costs something. Like all narrowness, the English sway of their colonies has no root of kindness. They govern by their arts and ability. They are more just than kind. And whenever an abatement of their power is felt, they have not conciliated the affection on which to rely. Of course, local distinctions, as those of nation, province, or town, are useful in the absence of real ones, but we must not insist on these accidental lines. Individual traits are always triumphing over national ones. There is no fence in metaphysics discriminating Greek or English or Spanish science. Aesop and Montaigne, Cervantes and Sadi are men of the world, and to wave our own flag at the dinner table or in the university is to carry the boisterous dullness of a fire club into a polite circle. Nature and destiny are always on the watch for our follies. Nature trips us up when we strut, and there are curious examples in history on this very point of national pride. George of Cappadocia, born at Epiphania in Cilicia, was a low parasite who got a lucrative contract to supply the army with bacon. A rogue and informer, he got rich and was forced to run from justice. He saved his money, embraced Arianism, collected a library, and got promoted by a faction to the episcopal throne of Alexandria. When Julian came, AD 361, George was dragged to prison. The prison was burst open by the mob, and George was lynched, as he deserved. And this precious knave became, in good time, St. George of England, patron of chivalry, emblem of victory and civility, and the pride of the best blood of the modern world. Strange that this solid, truth-speaking Briton should derive from an impostor. Strange that the New World should have no better luck. That broad America must wear the name of a thief. Amerigo Vespucci, the pickle dealer at Seville, who went out in 1499, a subaltern with Hojeda, and whose highest naval rank was boatswain's mate in an expedition that never sailed, managed in this lying world to supplant Columbus and baptize half the earth with his own dishonest name. Thus nobody can throw stones. We are equally badly off in our founders. And the false pickle dealer is an offset to the false bacon seller.